If you know me in real life, you will know this. I am obsessed with Shrek 2. This is to the point that I made it half my personality in high school, and even won a Mr. Blank competition largely centered around jokes about the film. So you should take my words seriously when I say DreamWorks' new film, The Wild Robot, may just be their best movie yet. In this video, I will kind of try to explain why. That even though I just watched the film yesterday as of the time of this writing, it already holds a special place in my heart. Partially because I saw it with my mom, but also because it's just a special kind of movie. It's rare that any piece of art, regardless of format or genre, has me questioning the human condition. And yet The Wild Robot had me pondering the nature of love for its entire duration. So if you want to learn about love, intention, programming, and how it all ties together, let's go on a wild journey together. To quickly get the obvious stuff out of the way first, and this section will serve as a spoiler-free one, let's talk about the more technical aspects of the film. To be candid, it simply looks beautiful. Honestly speaking, I only think one DreamWorks film is in contention for looking better than The Wild Robot, and that would be Puss in Boots 2: The Last Wish. And that's just in contention. While the art style isn't quite as creative as Puss in Boots 2, The Wild Robot makes up for it with stunning cinematography, and naturally spawning off of that, some truly breathtaking shots. Like basically whenever Roz feels an intense emotion. The music, while not as noteworthy, is still fantastic, and fits the tone and aesthetics of the film incredibly well. The sound design overall is great, with notable praise going towards the voice acting. It's truly some top-notch stuff, as each performance just fits the character so well. This is especially true with Roz, as we see her progression as a feeling being both through the story itself, but also her voice acting with the incredible Lupita Nyong. As for the story through a non-spoiler lens, man, just go watch the film. I seriously can't recommend it enough. But for a quick summary of the concept of the movie, it follows a robot that comes to be known as Roz, as she nurtures a newborn gosling so that he may learn to migrate. Simple, right? And yet it packs more emotion in its relatively short runtime than most trilogies even do. So please, if you've ever cared about my recommendations, go watch and support this one. We need more films like it in our world. For anyone who hasn't seen the film yet, go see it now. We should all support animation, but especially one that is this incredible. God knows not enough of us do. Now, for the rest of us, this section will actually not spoil the film really much at all upon looking back at it, yet this still won't be a recap video. And similar to my Joker 2 analysis, we will be jumping around a bit to properly talk about the film's many different themes. I'll let you know when the major spoilers are going to happen. So then, let's begin. Perhaps what I love the most about The Wild Robot in terms of thematic structure is that it's not at the forefront. While there certainly is a ton to analyze on that front, it's simply just not the focus. And instead, it opts to tell an emotionally driven story first, which I think actually supports many of its themes. Puelli Meiji Madoka Magica is no less than my 7th favorite anime of all time. And part of the reason I love it so much is that it takes a themes first approach. It's a cautionary tale above all else. And like Gen Urobuchi's other works like Fate Zero, it is ultimately a Greek tragedy. It sounds like a knock when I say it puts the characters secondary to the themes, and I would even go so far as to say the characters are plot devices in a much more extreme way than normal. But I mean it as a compliment. Honestly speaking, the emotional arc of the story itself sort of takes a backseat to the themes of morality, entropy, and love the series is trying to convey. and I seriously do love it for that. But I also love the wild robot for doing the exact opposite. Because at the end of the day, these are just two different ways to tell a story. Two very different approaches towards art, where one is not less than or greater than the other. Just different. And I, for one, enjoy both of these storytelling methods. I was kinda shocked that the wild robot took the emotional / character arc approach. When it comes to stories centered around AI, they usually focus much more heavily on the themes it inherently presents. Stuff like, what is a human? And the entire morality of AI and robotics. The film asks those questions, yes, but not directly. I would even go so far as to say it does so nonchalantly, and that it takes a back seat to the development of the characters. This is kind of a hard concept to explain, but if you're a storyteller like myself, I feel like you'll just get what I'm saying here. Rather than directly setting up scenarios where the audience is absolutely forced to ask questions, like the nature of the human condition, with games such as Detroit Become Human, the wild robot instead opts for an implicit storytelling approach. Finally, I found the right word for it. Like I said, most stories centered around robots are explicit in their thematic relevance, but this film is implicit, as it simply desires to tell a story that, yes, inherently implies themes, but does not do so in a way that directly confronts the reader. You can get absolutely nothing thematic out of the wild robot, and yet still absolutely adore it for what it is. A story. You can love its characters and progression without extrapolating deeper meaning behind each action that they take. Does that make sense? I really hope that makes sense. Implicit versus explicit storytelling. That's ultimately my point here. If I had to make what I can reasonably call a criticism, it would be the pacing. Sometimes what's happening on screen seems like pointless filler, and sometimes things just happen way too fast. But then I thought about it more, and I retract my statement. Which, while this would then make the film a literal perfect piece of art, something I have only ever claimed with the first seasons of Stranger Things and Arcane, it also says something grander. It's a story about life. The Wild Robot is a relatively simple story. Perfectly executed, yes, but ultimately simple. Not easy, and now without its bumps in the road for Roz, but it never really reinvents the wheel, as they say. And I kinda love it for that. It's innovative in the fact that it's not innovative, and it never once tries to be something it's not. Which I can't say for even my favorite pieces of art and media. The pacing is kind of all over the place for a very specific reason, as it tries to mimic life itself. Some days, honestly, even most days, life is mundane, and not much happens. It can seem like filler until the next big dramatic event occurs. But some films, like the brilliant About Time, and of course The Wild Robot, want us to recognize the sheer beauty of everyday life. To a conversation at your local coffee shop, to the fluttering of a million butterflies, there are so many moments to cherish. And it's hard to do that when you're not actively participating in your life, seeking those moments out, and most importantly, living with intention. WALL-E is my favorite Pixar movie, and it's really not even close. So much so that I recently had to defend its honor in a group chat with some friends of mine. And while I'll eventually get to making that video on it someday, it still pertains to this very video, as it has a lot of similarities to The Wild Robot. Both films want us, like the book Walden said so many years ago, to live with intention. And like that book, learning to do this can often require us to go on a grander adventure. Whether that be going to outer space itself, or more literally to the novel, living in the woods. This is to teach us perhaps the most important lesson a human can learn: to live with intention. As Thoreau says in the book, one does not need to live in the woods to do this, but rather one must actually live. Feel all the emotion life brings. Notice the beauty of a cute little pigeon bobbing its head back and forth while it walks. I think the wild robot encapsulates this feeling perfectly with Roz's wooden leg replacement. Not only was it a kind gesture as a sort of good karma in response to Roz's good nature, but I think it means more than that. She is fully integrated into the flow of nature and life itself, physically changing her not as a robot, but as a person. We'll get more into this in a later section of this video, but I think it means a lot as a symbol. That Roz has symbolically gone past her programming, whether robotic or humanistic, of simply completing tasks just for the sake of doing so, and has evolved into a being that lives with intention, that has come to cherish and love those small moments that come with life, and more importantly, that come with being a mother. And when I say a later section of the video, I mean now, because it's my video and I can do whatever I want. The Wild Robot, while essentially being a kids movie, does what any good kids property should do and doesn't insult the intelligence of the viewer. This is where we kinda get into spoilers, so go watch the movie. Roz has revealed that she has been going against her very programming for a long time now, is not played up for dramatic effect. It's stated simply, and I think that's a brilliant move on Chris Sanders' part. We as the audience can very clearly see this is almost certainly the case, and the film recognizes this level of media literacy and competency. It's rather obvious, and Roz, and thus the filmmakers, treat this as if it's rather obvious. But when looking beneath the surface, there's a whole slew of wider philosophical and psychological undertones that we can all gobble up like the greedy little gremlins we are. I want to ask you a question. What is your programming? Robots have long been symbolically representative of humans for as long as the art surrounding them has been around. From Near Automata to I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. But why exactly is this? What can we glean from robots, from AI, that says something about us as humans? A robot, in virtually every form it has been conceived in, has a set programming. Normally that is to benefit humanity in some way, but what's important here is the very nature of that programming, and how often strict it can be. And while many a media property has looked at AI going past their programming, I don't think any work of art has done it in quite the same way as the Wild Robot. I've talked about the sentience evolution of AI in the channel before, with my sort of analysis on the second episode of The Amazing Digital Circus. But again, it seems obvious here that Roz has already reached that step, and that through her interactions with other beings and with the world itself, she has gained sentience. But what does that even mean? What is sentience? And that is an answer I simply don't have. But what I can say is that true awareness is one's own ability to go against their natural programming. At some point, a sentient being has a self-evaluating core that makes their decisions. And while that core is something they develop through external influences and others, thus kind of bring true free will into question, another thing I've discussed ad nauseum on the channel, it undeniably is a core that has the ability to go against what we call the better judgment that the brain may conjure up. The most logical solution is not the one we exclusively go to, even if it's the one that has the highest insurance of survival. Even if it's the one that goes along with her programming. Love is an abstract concept, obviously, but at its basis, it is a survival mechanism. On the most primal level, a mother loves her child so that the child may survive. Thus, the species does right along with him. Animals love one another so that they may survive in a pack against predators or other natural factors. That's how we've survived as a species for so long, after all. And while we can discuss what the actual point of survival is, and thus life itself, that's not what we're here to do today. Instead, I want to offer you a scenario. A mother is at a lever. This lever controls a train, directing it to go either left or go right. On the left side, the default of where the train will inevitably go is her child, her son. Let's call him Bright Bill for no particular reason. He is strapped down to the tracks, unable to escape. On the right side, however, is the rest of humanity. Like, literally every single living person that exists on this planet, aside from the mother and her son. If she decides to pull the lever, the train will change course and kill all of those people. But her son will be safe. So then, what will she do? If you've taken even just Intro to Philosophy, you will know this is my own fun spin on the classic trolley problem. But ignoring the moral framework of the original problem, I instead want to ask you this. Will she pull the lever? Will she kill the rest of humanity just to save Bright Bill, her son? Logical reasoning based on survival of the species would of course say no. She won't pull the lever. The foundations of love itself would say no. She won't pull the lever. But, of course, for any of the mothers out there, I imagine at least more than 50% of you would indeed pull that lever. You would go against your very instinctual programming to save a single person, simply because you love them. This is, at least in my estimations, an unanswerable phenomenon. And yet the wild robot seems very interested in pondering this exact question. It wants to look at love itself, the very foundational contradiction of it, and say something simple, yet profound. Love triumphs over any sense of logical reasoning. Despite love ultimately being a survival instinct at its core, we will go against that very instinct to save those we love. Quite a paradox, isn't it? I shall officially trademark this concept as the paradox of love. Cool, ain't it? And perhaps that is what true sentience is. To be able to go against your programming. To be able to love. And this is something that Roz clearly experiences. I was going to originally make this section about how we all live by our programming. That to live with true intention is to go against it. But I changed my mind. This film made me change my mind. Sure, we all have a routine. And sure, we all don't notice every single beautiful thing and moment this world has to offer. And while that does matter rather significantly, I hope I've made it clear that just by loving someone with your whole heart, you are already going against your programming. By, say, becoming the adoptive mother of a baby goose, even though there is no specific task to be done, you are already living with intention. You are truly alive. Motherhood is complicated. It's messy. What did start with specific tasks that Roz had to complete, that being for Bright Bill to eat, swim, then fly, became so much more. In my eyes, the moment she gained her humanity was when, despite knowing that Bright Bill could now do all of those things, she still decided to watch him fly off. Just to make sure. Just to see him go. Just to say goodbye. And she does so much even after this scene that shows her humanity, like helping the other animals. The world of the wild robot is shown to be one initially devoid of love, where every creature preys on another because of their instincts, because of their programming. But through Roz, through a literal robot, they all learn to break free of their programming. They learn to love. And if that's not a beautiful thing, then I'm not really sure what is. Roz, in the end, truly does the impossible. And yet the most possible thing a human can do. She loves someone else. And, as always, thank you for watching.